How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States. 877-973-7425 is the phone number. If you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to the number 33777, you can get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast, everything else that you need for the show. I put this off until this hour because we had the big news about the economy. We've got the news about energy, and we got the news about the shutdown. So I wanted to wait. And if you haven't gotten my morning piece, if you do text the word data to 33777, you can get I think it's a 15-20% discount on the show notes. If you just text Eric to 33777, you can get it as well. The headline this morning is my nationally syndicated column, "We Arrive at My Fear." I wanted to wait to get here. We have arrived at the moment. I have, for the last several years, been telling my listeners on this program and my readers of my daily email that violence from the left is coming. And people on the left routinely reply, but January 6th, but January 6th. And I reply to each of them, you don't know your history. I don't dispute there have been moments of right-wing violence in this country. And much as the left, people on the right have oftentimes said, well, they're not really on our side. Tim McVeigh and what happened with the Oklahoma City and the Murrah Federal Building in 1994, that was not someone from a right-wing coalition from the conservative movement, but it was someone who was guided by a right-wing ideology. People on the right abhor when you say that, but it's true. There have been moments of right-wing violence in this country, but there have been way more moments of left-wing violence in this country's history, in large part because of how nihilistic left-wing violence is. Most people on the right, and you do have to understand this philosophically, most people on the right recognize there is a heaven and a hell in addition to this earth. And the goal is to get to heaven, not to hell, when you leave this earth. And that requires a set of moral standards, including not murdering other people. There are people on the right, though, who decide that they are God's agent. They go a little nuts and they go off the deep end and they decide they're going to take out other people, or they have become atheistic members of the right and they want to build a heaven on earth. And the problem is that on the left, secular atheism is more and more the default. And in secular atheism, you believe there is no heaven, there is no hell, this is all we have. And you have to do whatever you can to save this planet. And you've got to bring heaven to earth. You have to create utopia. And those knuckle-dragging mouth breathers who stand in your way have to be eliminated in some capacity. And in too many left-wing cases, it turns to genocide. It turns to mass violence and murder, whether it is National Socialism, which is socialism, Nazism, which is they say is coded right, but they're actually pretty progressive. Communism, which is definitely progressive, indisputably progressive. Maoism, which is a more virulent form of communism. And what we see in this country now with the left, whether it's the Weather Underground or the Black Liberation Army, left-wing groups descend into violence because they have to bring heaven to earth. They got to create a utopia, and to do it, they have to eliminate the opposition who they've decided are evil. But January 6th, on March 1st, 1954, a group of left-wing Puerto Rican nationalists shot up the House of Representatives, shooting members of the House of Representatives from the gallery. On March 1st, 1971, the Progressive Weather Underground bombed the U.S. Capitol. But January 6th, they actually bombed the U.S. Capitol and did it again on November 6, 1983, something called the Armed Resistance Unit, which was a far-left group affiliated with the remnant of the Weather Underground and the Black Liberation Army, bombed the United States Senate. But January 6th, these people were actually bombing the Capitol. And so what the left does is now they move the goalpost to, well, they were attempting to overthrow a democratic election. It didn't work. It didn't work. What I have been talking about for some time now is how the permission structure has been being developed and primed for violence on the left in this country. In 2017, writing in the New York Times, Linda Feldman Barrett, I think a Northwestern University professor and a noted psychologist, argued that, and I'm going to read you her words. If words can cause stress, and if prolonged stress can cause physical harm, then it seems that speech, at least certain types of speech, can be a form of violence. In 2017, progressives were beginning to seed the idea that words are violence. Very important that you make the distinction here. We're not saying words are violent. Some words can be violent. But words being violent are different from words being violence. Violence is something that directly causes you harm, physical harm. And they began arguing, and academics have been arguing, and progressive have embraced the philosophical idea that words are violence, and because words are violence, they can be responded to with other violence, other manifestations of violence. And since words can cause physical harm to you, physical harm can be done to those who speak the words. Jonathan Haidt gets a lot of chatter these days. He's the guy advocating banning cell phones from schools and making teenagers give up their cell phones. The left and the right, they love him these days. He responded to Lisa Feldman Barrett in The Atlantic in 2017, and he wrote this: telling college students and high schoolers that words are violence, telling them that words, ideas, and speakers can literally kill them. Even worse, at a time of rapidly rising political polarization in America, it helps a small subset of that generation justify political violence if you tell them words are violence. The conflation of words with violence is not a new or progressive idea invented on college campuses in the last 2 years. It's an ancient and regressive idea. Americans should all be troubled that it is becoming popular again, especially on college campuses where it least belongs. They seeded the philosophical rot that words are violence, and then they created the permission structure to meet those words with actual violence. Thomas Matthew Crooks laid down on a rooftop in Butler, Pennsylvania, pointed the rifle scope and rifle in the direction of President Trump, who was speaking on a stage nearby, and pulled the trigger. As he was pulling the trigger and the bullet flying through the air, on MSNBC, The Conversation, with a little window showing the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, the conversation was how Donald Trump was going to become an authoritarian dictator if someone didn't stop him. He would be corrupt and needed to be stopped. On Election Day in 2024, Michael Beschloss was on Morning Joe on MSNBC. And you got to remember that Beschloss, he's kind of one of the grand poobah historian talking heads that they love to have on Morning Joe on MSNBC. And he said this.
And if people are allowed to go on television and say what they think in the future, which again, that question is open this morning, in the future, historians are going to look back on this day and say, this is the day that America made a choice between freedom and democracy on one side and authoritarianism and dictatorship on the other.
12 hours before polling closed, he was on MSNBC saying historians were going to look back on this day and say this is the day America made the choice between freedom and democracy on one side and authoritarianism and dictatorship on the other side. And they chose Donald Trump, a man he said was going to be a dictator and would never surrender power. MSNBC and other progressive media outlets created a structure, a permission structure for people to commit violence. I was on CNN in 2011 when Jared Lee Loughner attempted to assassinate Congresswoman Gabby Giffords and did assassinate a federal judge. The conversations immediately turned to right-wing violence. On CNN, I was there when the anchors were pointing the finger at Sarah Palin, who used the, in their words, militaristic language of targeting Gabby Giffords, a word that had been used by politicians on both sides and by campaigns on both sides for decades. Suddenly, Sarah Palin was the one who caused this assassination. The New York Times blamed Sarah Palin for the assassination. Turns out Jared Lee Loughner was a nut job. He had no underlying philosophy to the extent his friends said he did. He was a socialist. He was just crazy and obsessed with Gabby Giffords. And as soon as it turned out it wasn't right-wing violence, CNN changed the subject. Friends of mine who were at CNN in 2017 said when it turned out James Hodgkinson, who tried to mass assassinate Republicans, turned out to be an MSNBC watcher, they dropped the conversation, stopped talking about it altogether. It was a both sides thing and Trump provoking violence until the moment he turned out to watch Rachel Maddow, and suddenly they stopped talking about it. CNN, the New York Times, other media outlets have created an excuse structure for the left. This morning on CNN, they were literally discussing how Joshua John, the shooter yesterday who killed the people in Texas, there's no motive. We have no idea why he did it. He wrote anti-ice on a bullet casing. Joshua John wrote in his journal beforehand that by shooting at ICE would live in fear, and that's what they needed. But Juliette Kamen on CNN, she's their national security analyst, rushes to social media whenever a progressive engages in violence. We don't know if it was because they were on the left. CNN, MSNBC creates the assassination permission structure. CNN produces the exculpatory excuse structure where you could say, we don't really know the motive on the left. It's always someone on the right, but on the left, both sides do it, and we don't know about this guy. And then Donald Trump got elected, and it triggered the left. Donald Trump's election was the triggering event. You had the philosophical rot festering. Then you had the permission structure from MSNBC. Then you had the excuse structure from CNN. And then you had the trigger. The left lost their power. Donald Trump's elected. They've been saying he was an authoritarian. If he came back to power, you got to act. And then the left ramped up the rhetoric. Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut, tells progressives you got to get comfortable doing things you otherwise wouldn't be comfortable doing. We are in his words, a war. In fact, Chris Murphy is now on MSNBC saying calling ICE agents Nazis isn't something that ramps up the rhetoric. The man just said the Democrats are at war and they got to get comfortable doing things they otherwise wouldn't do.
I want to ask you about the shooting in Dallas yesterday. 2 people killed, another injured, and some of the rhetoric we've been talking about this morning. Vice President Vance immediately at an event blaming the left, blaming Democrats before we had all the information. Certainly did the same after the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk. Leadership in these moments, I'm thinking about you after Sandy Hook nearly 13 years ago. How important is it for leaders, especially at the very, very top of the government, to set the tone?
Listen, it should not matter whether the radicalization comes from the right or the left or, sort of the non-ideological deep, dark recesses of the internet. This vice president has had a chance now since the assassination of Charlie Kirk to bring the country together to try to stamp out all sorts of violence, including political violence, and they refuse to do that. What they are trying to do is exploit these murders and these shootings in order to silence only dissent and political opposition on the left. No, criticizing the way that ICE is rounding up people in this country in a deeply inhumane and immoral way is not an incitement to violence.
You got that? In a deeply inhumane and immoral way. And then attacking Vance and Trump for the rhetoric. Chris Murphy is literally the man the day before Charlie Kirk was assassinated who told the left they are at war and need to get comfortable doing things they otherwise wouldn't do because they got to save democracy. Gavin Newsom goes on Stephen Colbert and tells the left there's not going to be an election in 2028. Donald Trump is going to cancel it unless we do something to stop him. The only way this gets stopped now is because Donald Trump uses the FBI and the Justice Department to go shut down the funding schemes for the left and round up the left and arrest them because they're not policing it. They should police themselves. But when you've got United States senators like Chris Murphy get to go on the assassination network, MSNBC, and say they're the bad guys and what they're doing is Nazi-like behavior with no accountability for his own words, they want more violence. It's here now. What I've been telling you for several years was coming is here now. And even The Atlantic is willing to say it's disproportionately on the left now, and Democratic members of Congress live in fear of their base. We have reached the moment I feared would come. It's played out exactly as I have told you these last few years that it would. Yes, you can call in 877-973-7425 if you want to be on the show. As always, if you text ERIC, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you can get the live stream, the podcast, the show notes, and a whole lot more. Glad to have you guys with me today. We've got a lot more in the show that we got to cover, and in particular, I got to talk about now the disconnected elite that are out there that don't really seem to have a clue of what's going on and don't understand how they're provoking violence. I want to play this montage for you. These are Democrats talking about ICE. See if you think this could provoke someone to deal with ICE in a violent way.
Every single ICE agent who's engaged in this aggressive overreach, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, will of course be identified. This is not the 1930s.
Secret police who are masked, who are intimidating, who are scaring people. These Gestapo-like tactics.
This is Gestapo-like behavior.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets.
When you compare the old films of the Gestapo grabbing people off the streets of Poland, it does look like a Gestapo operation.
Yeah, I wonder where Democrats have decided to turn violent comes from. I want you to go to EdenPureDeals.com today, put in the discount code ERIC3, and we can't clean up the Democrats, but we can clean up the air, get rid of stinky odors. You can get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms and save $200. Get them for less than $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. They're an air purifier, so they get rid of dust and pollen. They get rid of bacteria and viruses that float through the air and pull through the machine. But then it generates ozone, and ozone is known to wipe out odor. So you get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms, and you can start cleaning up the stinky smells in your house, upstairs, downstairs, your basement, your travel bag, your RV, wherever you need them. You go to EdenPureDeals.com. Use the discount code ERIC3, ERICK3. At EdenPureDeals.com. They're small, they're portable. I keep one in my travel bag. You can plug it into the wall or plug it up with a USB cord, and it just works at eliminating all odors, smoke odors, litter box odors. Someone smoked in the rental car before you got their odors. All of it wipes them out. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code ERIC3. Hello there. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. There's an all-hands-on-deck meeting at the Pentagon. They're bringing all the generals and admirals home. I have no idea. In fact, Kobe and I were in here talking about this news report that it's unprecedented. This is from the Washington Post. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered hundreds of the U.S. military's generals and admirals to gather on short notice and without a stated reason at a Marine Corps base in Virginia next week, sowing confusion and alarm after the Trump administration's firings of numerous senior leaders this year. The highly unusual directive was sent to virtually all of the military's top commanders worldwide, according to more than a dozen people familiar with the matter. It was issued earlier this week against the backdrop of a potential government shutdown, and as Hegseth's overtly political moves have deepened a sense of distress among his opponents, who fear he is erasing the Department of Defense's status as a nonpartisan institution. First of all, the Department of Defense is not a nonpartisan institution. It is progressive liberal pablum that the Department of Justice and the Department of Defense are somehow independent, nonpartisan entities. They're located within the executive branch of government inside the cabinet of the President of the United States, who can hire and fire at will. It's not and has never been a nonpartisan entity. Now, to be sure, the military personnel are nonpartisan. They serve at the pleasure of the president, but they're there to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and the country, irrespective of partisanship. But at the civilian side, it's partisan, and the president gets to control the military. Notice what is happening here is that the press has gone completely hysterical about something. Now, my concern, if I'm actually honest about it, is having all those generals and admirals in one location within a week of uncovering that plot in New York City of the telecom potential cyber terror attack. I don't know that we need to get them all in the same room at one time near Washington, D.C. But that as well is a judgment call by the Secretary of Defense, who's decided he wants it. And the media has chosen to run hysterics. This is the New York Times. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has summoned scores of generals and admirals from around the world to meet on short notice next week at a Marine Corps base in Virginia, but has not disclosed the reason. The unusual directive, which has been filtering its way through military commands, and the undisclosed rationale has stirred anxiety at a time Hegseth has fired several senior officials. The 4 U.S. officials who spoke on conditions of anonymity confirmed the gathering was scheduled for next week. There are about 800 general-level officers in the armed forces, including 44 at the most senior 4-star level. It was not immediately clear how many of them would be ordered to the gathering. In May, Mr. Hegseth ordered a 20% reduction in 4-star officers, continuing the broad job reductions and firings that have marked the course of his tenure. That's the New York Times. This is Fox News. The Pentagon is convening a meeting of top generals. Multiple War Department officials confirmed to Fox News top military commanders have been asked to fly to Virginia. The topic remains unclear. The Pentagon confirmed the meeting. By the way, I'm not calling it it's interesting. Fox News is so quickly moving to the new speak of the GOP that it's the War Department. Congress hasn't changed the name. It takes an act of Congress to change the name. I'm calling it the Defense Department. That has nothing to do with anything other than it is officially the Defense Department. Congress itself chose that name, and just because there's an executive order on it, I'm sorry, I'm not changing the name until Congress says it's now the War Department. CBS News says the Defense Secretary has directed numerous generals and admirals, as well as some of their staff from around the world, to come to Quantico. No other details. There are regularly scheduled meetings, but a meeting of this size in person is rare, if not unprecedented. Now, what's going on here? I'm reading you from all of these different outlets because it's important you understand that NBC News, the Washington Post, the New York Times, to its credit, CBS News did not go there. It's a very short report, but most of them are all lighting their hair on fire. This is madness. This is crazy. He can't do this. Yes, he can. It must be to fire all the generals. It must be to plot a coup. It must be to overthrow the government. It must be to undermine the military. It must be to install loyalists. Doesn't matter. He gets to do it. And this goes to my prior point on how the media is itself complicit with the Democrats in designing a permission structure for the left to turn violent, to manipulate the vulnerable and depraved to turn violent, and they dial every single story up to an 11 on a scale of 1 to 10. I have no idea why the Secretary of Defense is doing this. I don't know that it's a smart idea to bring 800 or however many of them there are to this place at Quantico. Given the situation around the world, it makes it an easy target for bad guys. But he thinks they're going to be fine. He wants them there. Who am I to second guess the Secretary of Defense? Who are they to second guess the Secretary of Defense? And time again, all they want to do is ramp up the rhetoric and the anxiety. And that's part of it, too, is they're ramping up anxiety. It's not just rhetoric, it's anxiety. I started this montage by Western Landsman earlier. I want to play this now in its entirety. These are the Democratic members of Congress who are comparing ICE to Gestapo. This is the full montage. And again, it's Western Landsman put this together.
Every single ICE agent who's engaged in this aggressive overreach, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, will of course be identified. This is not the 1930s.
Secret police who are masked, who are intimidating, who are scaring people. These Gestapo-like tactics.
This is Gestapo-like behavior.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets.
When you compare the old films of the Gestapo grabbing people off the streets of Poland, it does look like a Gestapo operation.
You posted on social media that, quote, ICE is acting like a terrorist force.
ICE agents, they are coming and kidnapping and disappearing people on the streets of the United States.
But this terror campaign of having masked people rolling up in vans, but we also have to talk about the agents themselves that are carrying this out. If you have any decency, quit now. Because just doing what you were told has been the justification for some of the worst horrors and crimes against humanity.
Masked agents of the state in unmarked vehicles are terrorizing communities. They are disappearing people.
One has to assume they're hiding something or they're hiding misbehavior, because otherwise, why would they be wearing masks and denying their identities?
If everything is legitimate and proper, why are you wearing masks to hide your face?
Not look like America. We are going to require them to show their faces. If you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't have anything to hide.
Yeah. They're being gunned down. That's why they're hiding their faces. Those are Democrats. This is MSNBC.
ICE is looking more and more like an American Gestapo.
They're huddled around the elevator banks in masks without identifying information. What a terrifying, these are Gestapo tactics.
But it has created this year, as they've seen, the kind of fascist ICE Gestapo militias go round up Latino American citizens in places like LA.
ICE agents, masked ICE Gestapo agents, getting more funding than any other law enforcement agency in the history of the United States.
ICE running Gestapo-like around our country.
The Gestapo had the same function. It was there to draw a distinction between us and them. It was not federally, it was controlled by the leader. And we're seeing disturbing similarities between this force and the Gestapo.
We've got these masked thug cowards kidnapping innocent people and sending them off to be slaves or tortured in other countries.
Dressing like thugs and acting like thugs.
People still want to come here despite the crazy. They still want to come here because they know in this land their voice is protected. Their rights are protected. And there won't be jackbooted thugs coming in wearing masks over their face to take them off the streets. Oh, wait. I'm sorry, Simone, that's happening.
Oh, it's happening.
That's happening right now.
Y'all, jackbooted thugs, Gestapo. And again, Chris Murphy goes on television this morning and says, no, call them the Gestapo. That's not inspiring people to shoot them. Literally, this progressive activist in Dallas, who the left still insists is not a progressive activist, left behind to note how shooting ICE would maybe cause them to have fear. And all of this goes to the Pentagon and the meeting. The media itself is ramping up the anxiety. It's not just the Democrats. It's the media ramping up the anxiety. We know from outside in, and this is not Republican data, this is Harvard, this is Yale, this is Johns Hopkins. These are psychological studies and surveys of the American people post-COVID. It is progressives who have more mental health problems in this country right now than conservatives. And again, Harvard, Yale, Johns Hopkins, not me. That's not my opinion. It's their studies. Progressive women are the most fragile in the country. Progressive men are the second most. White ones, by the way, not black. Black progressives are actually in a better mental health state than white progressives. White progressives are coming unglued. And there is a small cohort, a subset of them, who are turning violent. Tyler Robinson assassinating Charlie Kirk. This kid yesterday shooting at ICE agents because he wanted to make them fear. And when you have the national media dial everything up, turn everything into some sort of anxiety-riddled frenzy that, oh my gosh, Secretary Hexas is bringing the military home. What are they going to? They're going to turn the military on the American people. They're going to round up America. They're going to arrest Congress unless somebody stops them. They're preying on the vulnerable and depraved. They want this violence. Too many people on the left want the violence. And the left needs to police itself. The Democrats need to police themselves, but they're not going to. That means that Donald Trump is going to have to. Going to have the DOJ. Going to have the FBI. They're going to need to investigate. There's a story out in the New York Times about a British billionaire who is funding progressive causes inside the United States. What progressive causes? What is Alex Soros funding through his Open Society? What are they funding? What is Arabella Partners funding? The dark money groups on the left, are they funding the people who put out the piles of bricks for the rioters? Are they funding the cell phone communication networks of these progressive activists? Are they trying to find vulnerable, anxious, young, partisan progressives and then target them to try to prime them for violence? What are they doing? They're not going to police themselves. The Atlantic is sounding the alarm on the left that violence is growing disproportionately on the left right now. There's a problem. And the Democrats are like, we're not going to have an election in 2028 unless we stop Donald Trump. We've got a Gestapo that needs to be stopped. They're rounding people up. Show us your faces so we can kill you is the implied threat. These people are not mentally well. And the result is this Reuters poll that came out yesterday that Republicans have a better handle on stopping political violence in the country. Republicans have a better handle on gun control in the country. Republicans have a better handle on stopping corruption in the country because the Democrats are becoming insane. I mean, they've always been mentally fragile. They are completely insane now and completely committed to the fact that this country is illegitimate. It goes back to the 1619 Project. They think the country was founded and steeped in racism. It's an illegitimate country. And the only way to stop the illegitimacy is for the left to have power. But the left does not have power right now, which gives the left a permission structure to cause violence and then an excuse structure from the rest of the media to say it's not really us doing it. They got what they deserved. How many people on the left have said on social media, Charlie Kirk got what he deserved? Why? Because he would not yield to them in the battle of ideas. He would not accept that they were right. And because he didn't accept they were right, he deserved to die, according to these progressives. And they're only becoming more unhinged. And Donald Trump has not even been in office for a year yet. We've got 3 more years and then some to go of this. How much more insane are the left going to get? Considering the number of them who decided to take Tylenol after Monday, I do think the president at this point needs to campaign around the country and tell all these progressives that breathing oxygen is good for them and see what happens. It may be the only way to stop this rash of violence in the country. So can we I got to tell y'all something I'm dealing with. Yeah, it kind of makes me chuckle, but also roll my eyes. So on this program yesterday, I told y'all that my son had texted me from school during one of his breaks. They're not allowed to have their phones except during break. And he texted me that the boys in the class had now begun referring to each other as Tylenol Americans. And it started because I showed him an Instagram reel. I guess it was technically my fault. I showed him an Instagram reel where someone said, instead of calling people autistic, call them Tylenol Americans. He thought it was very funny. He sent it to his class group chat, and by Wednesday, the boys are all calling themselves Tylenol Americans. One of the kids got an answer wrong in class that he should have been very obvious, and he apologized to the teacher and said, "I'm sorry, I took Tylenol this morning," and everybody laughed. It's just ever since the press conference on Monday about Tylenol, it has become a joke. And instead of calling each other the R word, which high school boys are prone to do, or calling each other autistic, they're now calling each other Tylenol Americans and making jokes about it. And I noted on Twitter, I thought it was very funny that these 10th and 11th grade boys are calling each other Tylenol Americans. And of course, progressive white woman who works for the New York Times, "You're going to have to let me in on the joke. I don't find this funny. Making autistic people the butt of your jokes." They're not making autistic people the butt of the jokes, making the stupid press conference about Tylenol the butt of the joke. Had some other progressive, "Thanks to you and Donald Trump, my son's going to be the butt of jokes with his autism." No, your son's the butt of jokes because you're his mother, you progressive, terrible person. But, I mean, you just can't laugh with progressives. It's like I was saying at the first hour. You get a kid with the women and gender studies degree out of college and you tell them a joke. If they laugh, they become a barista. If they don't, they become a head of HR. That's not funny. Yes, it's very funny. And then the other thing is this wild idea now that we have to have the same sense of humor, that we're only allowed to laugh about the things the least funny people want to laugh about. I find things fantastically funny that other people don't find funny. I have a demented sense of humor, and my children do as well. I will note my son stopped telling jokes about the Nazis and the Holocaust after watching Schindler's List. Probably a good thing. That's going to get him in trouble later in life. But the fact that you can't laugh at a group of high school boys who've suddenly started calling each other Tylenol Americans, I'm sorry, that's funny. If you can't figure out why, that's your problem, not mine. Now, I got to tell you about Hillsdale College, because you can go to Hillsdale College and take one of 40 different classes for free. Been a while since I've been there. ERICK for Hillsdale, HILLSDALE.com, ericforhillsdale.com. Start for free today, it says. Their recommended class, the one on capitalism, by the way, it actually is really good. So it's 7 30-minute videos you watch at your own pace. It talks about how capitalism rewards people with profit and punishes them with loss, depending on the merit of their actions, and how it expresses freedom and rationality of human nature and economic systems, how it involves arm's length transactions, promotes private property, the protection of private property. Really good. The great one on the Federalist Papers. They've got a new one on Aristotle's Ethics. That's 10 lessons. They're all, again, 30-minute videos. In the Aristotle one, it's 10. In the Federalist Papers, it's 10. It's 7 in the capitalism one. They're free at no charge. ericforhillsdale.com. Go sign up with Hillsdale College today.